This tank has never received a water change. A little over 500 days ago, I set this tank up shortly after graduating college. Since then, I've moved twice, and during that process, I drained the tank into an empty trash can, which I brought along with me, and used to refill the tank. You may be wondering how this is still thriving despite completely neglecting water changes. Well, grab yourself something to eat, grab yourself a drink, and I'll do my best to paint the full picture. My philosophy on water changes is really simple. I use them as a tool to address issues in my tanks. If the nutrients are too high, I do a water change. If ammonia, nitrites, or nitrates are too high, I do a water change. The inverse is also true, though. If the tank is healthy and stable, I don't do a water change. If there's no immediate reason to change the water, I don't. Now that you understand my philosophy behind water changes, it might make more sense why I haven't done any on this tank. It hasn't given me a reason to. So, let's sort of take a look at the most common reasons we might change water, and I'll give my thoughts on why this tank has avoided those. The most common reason we change water in our aquariums is to minimize ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates. As food, waste, and plant matter break down in this tank, ammonia is produced. Via the nitrogen cycle, this ammonia becomes nitrites, and then, finally, nitrates. This tank is thoroughly cycled with mountains of beneficial bacteria, so we don't need to worry so much about ammonia as long as we don't overfeed. The same logic applies to nitrites, as another strain of bacteria will turn them into nitrates. So our bacteria will take care of the first two steps, but what about nitrates? It's very common for nitrates to build up over time and demand a water change. Well, that's where the unkept masses of plants come in. Every plant in this tank feeds from the water column rather than from the roots. A lot of aquarium plants pull nutrients from the soil, but these don't. Because of that, our nitrates remain very low at all times. I've never seen the level in this tank over 5 parts per million, which is well within the healthy range. Fast-growing plants are the most effective solution to nitrates that I've ever found. Duckweed, guppy grass, java moss, and sesquitertongue are all doing their parts in this tank. Because I let them run wild, nitrates are not an issue for me. The second most common reason that I would typically change water in an aquarium is to minimize the nutrients in the water column. Now, the reason this tank has been able to avoid that is virtually identical to the last answer. Nutrients build up in the water column over time as we feed and fertilize our tanks. Now, side note, this tank does not receive any fertilizer or CO2, it just doesn't need it. But regardless, in many tanks, these excess nutrients will be used by algae, which can take over the tank and cause an ugly mess. In this tank, though, the plants are so fast-growing and demanding of nutrients that there tends not to be much left over for the algae. For those of you who haven't seen this channel before and aren't familiar with this specific tank, the shrimp population is growing rapidly. They're breeding out of control and there are babies all over the place, so we can safely assume that the lack of water changes is not having a negative impact on our livestock. My goal is always to keep my videos as concise as possible because I have a tendency to yap endlessly and nobody wants to hear that. So to give a final thought, this tank is thriving in its current state. If something down the line occurs that requires a water change, I will do one. Until then, I see no reason to. My shrimp really seem to appreciate the stable water parameters, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on regular water changes in the comments down below. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it and want to see the future of this tank. Thanks for watching and happy shrimp keeping.